Hello, I'm going to start this video by moaning that it's still flipping hot. Too hot for this kind of work. Now, if you've been following some of my videos recently, you've seen some back-to-back jobs, smaller and smaller and progressively getting bigger. The last job I did was about 3 weeks working on a big pond locally, restoring some edging and putting some proper edging in. And now I'm into building a pond from scratch. The temperatures on the last job were getting up into the 30s. And again this week here, the following week on from the last heat wave, we're back up into the high 20s today. And it looks like it's getting back into the 30s again for the weekend. So very, very hot. At least it's dry, I guess. So what's going on with this one? Well, I was approached some time ago by a designer and a gardener, a lovely lady called Cami, who has designed a lovely idea for a pond, but wanted to have a little bit of help with the actual construction process and a bit of advice. I'll ping up a picture of the design and the plans somewhere up there. But essentially, it's going to be kind of a yin and yang effect. One side of it being a pond, and the other side of it being a bog garden, which the pond is going to overflow into. And there's a little bit of symmetry there, tying in with a couple of other borders around the garden, which have a similar kind of theme. Now, there is an old existing pond here already. I don't think it's had much water in for a very long time. It seems to be growing trees rather than pond plants. There's a couple of things I'd like to salvage in here. Predominantly some water lilies, what looks to be either Nymphaea alba or Odorato alba, one of our smaller native whites. Everything else in here, the juncus and the self-seeded willows and things, that's all going to go to scrap. And likewise, some of the plants that are here either side, the Cocosmia, the daisies and things, they'll all be getting dug up and going as well. And I've got an area here defined by this hose on the floor to work in. I can go a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller if needs be, but essentially this is the area that I'm going to be working in. And the idea is to build this pond, which is going to be edged in the typical fashion with the usual sort of stone that I use. Some nice planting zones, a nice shallow area where the pond transitions and meets into the bog garden, integrating some filtration and a return from the filter to create the sound of water, a little bit of a water feature. I'm thinking probably something quite simple like an amphora, an urn sitting on its side, cascading water into the pond. So we get a nice sound, nice visual effect, but keeping it nice and simple. Something like this, it's all about the planting. So having the marginal plants in contrast with the bog plants behind it is going to make for an interesting project. So this is the area I got to work with. Kind of an oval shape, about 25 feet or so in length and about 12 to 15 feet in width. Now, annoyingly, the pond, which is already here, is going to kind of straddle a bit of the bog garden and a little bit of the pond. And it's not really deep enough for the pond, but it's a little bit too deep for the bog garden. So once I've got this area cleared, I shall end up digging some of the footprint of the pond and filling this old pond back up again so that I can create some firm ground to define a proper edge between the pond and the bog area. But before I do any of that, I've got to start clearing around the edge of the pond. And already I've discovered something that I was hoping wasn't there, but it is. There's a bit of a foundation here underneath the slabs that will end up having to come out. I might end up being able to use some of the material under this to create a bit of a retaining wall in the pond, so it might be useful. Thankfully the slabs have just been laid dry, so they're easy enough to lift up, but I'll get all of this removed and then I can start thinking about clearing out some of the plants and getting a clean slate, so I can then start to define and to draw onto the ground, etch into the ground with some paint, what will be the outlines of the bog garden and the pond. It's been a busy start to the year, and I think once I finish this job, I'm going to be looking forward to a well-earned holiday. So I'm making good progress this morning in clearing out the area. I've got rid of all of the plants behind me in that bed, and I'm now working on the pond. I was hoping that this was going to be relatively easy, as obviously all the plants have been restrained by the pond liner, but they've all grown and twined together, and there was also a load of pond netting that had been left in the pond, which everything had grown up through. So it's been very difficult trying to separate the net from the plants. As you can see, this is what happens when ponds get left without any maintenance for many years. The pond plants will just take over, the pond will start to dry out, and it will become a bog, and eventually it will dry out entirely. And you can see this thick layer of root mass and sediment and organic matter which I'm having to deal with. Now here, because obviously we're not retaining the pond liner, I can get involved with some equipment, some spades and digging tools to make it a little bit easier, although still physically it's quite tough. But if you were doing this in a pond where you were just doing a clearance but you wanted to hang on to the pond liner, this would be very difficult to deal with without tools and without them potentially damaging the liner. So it's a very good reason why you need to do regular maintenance on your plants, and at least seasonally or annually take the baskets, if they're in baskets, out and trim out any excess roots. If you've got plants that are growing bare rooted in marginal zones, just make sure you pull out any sort of extremities of foliage that is, you know, encroaching too much in the pond. But you need to look after the plants and stop them from taking over. Now this is predominantly juncus or common rush, and then a lot of water lily growing in here as well. And I'm just using my heavy digging bar to chop through this root mass. You see why you wouldn't be able to do this if you were trying to preserve the pond liner. You'd end up with a lot of repairs and probably having to reline the pond entirely afterwards. And once I've loosened it with this, I go back in with a straight edge spade or a shovel and just try and chop it out. There's the remains of an old basket in there. This is hot work. Today, 31 degrees forecast. It's 11 o'clock, 11:30, and it's currently about 28 degrees. So I am very pleased that I've got my gazebo with me just to provide me a little bit of shade. I think otherwise I would have given up a long time ago. But I'm just giving myself little targets initially. Today, get all this cleared up. There's a load of brickwork and foundation under here. I'd like to try and make a good start on clearing all of that, and then get the last of the Crocosmia and the plants out the other side, and then at least this whole area is cleared. Oh, come on. It's all this netting that's the problem. It's allowed all the roots to just grow together. Look at this, just a thick, fibrous sheet. I would get my saw out, but I seem to have lost it. Last bit. Hurrah. Right, I think I'm going to have a lie down after that. I'm amazed at how much has come out of this little pond. There's so much. I'm going to leave all this just laid out on a tarp for a few days. It's going to dry out. It's going to make it a lot easier to manage. Right, it's nearly 1 o'clock. Heat of the day now. We're up in the 30s. Only mad dogs and Englishmen work in these sorts of temperatures. I must be both. Morning. New day back. First day back after Dad's camping weekend. Feeling a bit jaded, a few late nights. Raring to go. Old pond liner removed. Nice bit of fleece under here as well. And we've revealed what I assume was the original pond. I think once upon a time this was the original lining, and there was this brick edge, and then at some stage somebody's come along and put a second liner over the top and then just put some paving slabs dry on top of this. This is a very, very old, thin, brittle PVC lining, It's not been put in very well. But today's job is going to be removing all of the stone edging, and then to start to think about marking out the outer edge, the footprint of the whole pond feature, the pond and the bog area, so that we can start to dig out. I say we because I have a special guest helping me today. Ta-da!
Good morning.
The return of Dave. It's been a little while, hasn't it?
It's good to be back.
It is good to be back. So you're going to be doing all the breaking today, hooking out all the stones. So it's been a couple of years, hasn't it, really, since you've been doing some ponds with me?
It has, yeah.
Do we want to divulge why?
Yes, if you want to know, I'm very lucky. I could have died 4 years ago. I've got prostate cancer, but it's under control to the point now that I can get back to doing my normal daily life.
I know we shouldn't discuss ages, but how old are you now?
I'm going to be 70 next month.
70 next month, there you go. Look, I have to say, if that's not inspiration for anybody, I mean, he puts me to shame. He's fitter and stronger than me, so it's great to have him back and great to have him doing a bit of work with me. It's lovely having some help. I've been able to go away and come back and find Dave's done all of the brickwork. But he has discovered something which is very sad. We've obviously disturbed a little nest of something here, what look like little voles. Mummy is nowhere to be seen. This whole area is getting dug up and broken up, so there's no chance that she's going to come back and find them. And poor little babies. So I've just made a phone call to a local rescue centre, Heart Wildlife Rescue. Means I've got to jump in the van and go and head off and take these little babies over to them.
Well, I carry on working.
Yeah, whilst Dave carries on working. But I can't knowingly hurt these little babies. The little ones are still going. So I have just arrived at the Heart Wildlife Hospital. So they were a pair of shrews apparently. They did have a slightly elongated snout. So I did think it was something like a shrew or a vole. Apparently it's very, very vulnerable at this stage. Chances not looking fantastic, but if they can get through the next few days, they're going to let me know and make sure they're okay. As I say, it's not really something that I was pleased to discover, but I just couldn't leave them there and not do anything with them. So I've just taken the little leaflet here as well, Heart Wildlife Rescue. If you're local to sort of the Hampshire and Surrey area, I have dropped off birds to these guys before and a hedgehog a long time ago, and they are completely reliant on donations. So if you ever feel that you have any spare cash and you want to donate, Heart Wildlife Rescue, I'll probably put a link in the description of the video below, would be a very, very valued cause. Right, let's go and actually do some work now. Don't know if you can pick it up on the camera, but look at this perfect ellipse that's been sprayed on the floor. You might notice a few attempts. I did some different shapes and different sort of axis ellipses that we weren't very happy with, but settled on this one. And I think it's worth a mention on how we actually were able to create this. So I can't claim to know this already. I did look it up on the internet. Google and YouTube is a wonderful thing, but I'm very pleased I did. It's a very useful skill to remember for the future. And essentially, it was all about triangles. I had to have a long axis, the length, a short axis, or the width. And it's very important that that short axis crosses the long axis at the halfway point, and that it's a proper right angle at 90 degrees. So you're going to want to use a set square. I used one of the slabs that were here, knowing that that had a nice right angle so that I could set that string off at the correct angle. So in this instance, we've got 8 meters or thereabouts and about 5.7 meters. And once you've got your cross reference, the important bit is the measurement of half of the long axis. You take a string from the end of the short axis and you run that 4 meter measurement, or that half length axis measurement, across to the long axis string. You following me? Where that crosses the string, that becomes what you call a focal point, and you put a pin in that position. And then you do the same over here. You get your string from the end of the short axis and you run it over here, and where it crosses over the string, you stick another pin, which is what this is. Then you make a triangle with some string. You mark out between all those 3 pegs. 1, 2, 3. Now we've got a triangle. And the clever bit, you take the string off of this pin, and this now becomes the template to create a lovely ellipse, a lovely oval. That's 1/2. And I used my spray can and just sprayed it on the floor, like so. And then you flip the string over and you do the other half. Wonderfully simple, very effective. And now it's marked up on the floor, we can start to dig out the turf so that we don't lose this shape. Brilliant. Dave is doing a good example of showing us how to dig efficiently with a spade. Is the ground any softer?
Good morning. No, it's not.
So it's been a few days since I've got the camera out. I've actually had myself a little family holiday, a few days camping in Cornwall, which was very nice. So today is the first day back on the job. We've had a little bit of rain, which is great. I was really hoping that that would help to soften the ground a little bit. But even though we've had about 16 or 17 mil of rain in the last couple of days, it's barely penetrated the surface. I can see here where Dave's digging, a few inches down, it's bone dry. So the ground is still very hard. But having established our nice oval shape, we're initially just going around and we're scraping away the top kind of 6 to 8 inches of topsoil, the loose topsoil, putting that to one side and hanging onto it. And just trying to get the whole area dug down to a sort of a uniform level depth, so that we can then from there start to dig out the slightly more compact sub-base beneath to get that section filled up, and then we can start to outline the shape of the pond and the bog garden. But it's been really hard digging. So with the combination of the laser, which I was able to go round this initial shape and find out where the low spots were, and then just a big manual level, we're digging it out in sections, being careful as we go. We've had the first day of some proper serious digging. It's starting to take shape now. It's nice to be able to get the old pond filled up, or nearly there, get the ground back up to being level, so that we can start to then lay out some hoses and really start to create that shape of the 2 sections of this feature, the yin and the yang of the pond and the bog garden. So I'm being a bit tentative initially. I've sort of laid out a rough shape. It's reasonably accurate, but I'm very conscious that when I'm digging, if I've taken out too much soil, it's very difficult to put it back again to create a nice firm footing onto which I can build. So I'm sort of digging out the initial proportions of the pond a little bit smaller than they need to be, so that I can always go bigger or change the shape slightly if I need to. Once I get this final layer of soil put into the pond and whack it down nice and firm, I can then really get the proper shape. The disappointing thing is, obviously a lot of this is going to have to be dug out again later on, but needs must. It was important to get that filled up to ground level first, so that we could really focus on getting an accurate shape for this. The ground, despite some rain, is still very solid. So the whole thing is going to have to be dug with pickaxes and the digging bar to loosen it all up before we can then shovel out all the soil. And it's been a godsend having Dave with me on this. He's off out early this morning. I think he's got a dentist appointment, but he'll be joining me at lunchtime. The comments and the questions and the subscribers keep going up on the channel at the moment, so as always, thank you very much. Very appreciative of that. Well, a few more days of this and the pond will be dug. And there we go. It's almost as if the old pond never existed. So that's been filled and well firmed down with a nice little manual whacker like this. It's a shame to think that having filled this, I'm going to have to then partially redig it out again. But it was important that I could make sure the ground was nice and firm, so that the pond shape, the edging, would have the integrity and the structure to be able to hold up the pond liner. Now that the excavation is filled, it means I can actually lay the hose properly and accurately to define the shape of the pond and the bog garden. So I've used a hose initially, and I've taken lots and lots of measurements from my centre string, and then I've positioned a couple of strings equal distance either side of it, so I can measure whereabouts they cross over on each path, on each side of the halfway point. I think that's pretty accurate. And then I've marked it on the ground with a bit of red spray paint to make it more obvious. So now I can carry on digging and get the pond dug out. It's going to be a big pond. My hands are feeling it already. That's the signs of working hands. Really starting to take shape now, isn't it? Starting to look a bit like a pond. So I'm at the stage where I'm starting to work out exactly where I want water levels to be. Now this pond is being built on a slight slope. The lawn isn't completely level. It's probably about 6 inches higher from one side to the other. So I'm basing water level on the lowest part of the garden. Obviously, if we're going to go higher than that, we have to start to build up retaining walls or build up the ground level sufficiently to be able to contain that much water. So I'm going to use the lowest part of the pond as my guideline for how high I can get the pond to go. I've got a little stone I've just laid on the floor here, which is my rough visual guide, and I'm just using my laser Yeah, that's good enough. Using my laser so I can work out where it's going to be in relation to the other side of the pond. So I've now got a visual reference as to what will be maximum water level, and then from there that's going to dictate all of the levels of the shelving and the deeper sections of the pond from there on. Now the next stage for us is to start to excavate down what will be the marginal zones. We know where the water's going to be. We know that we want 2 or 3 inches of water above what will be a bed of gravel, and we know we want 4, 5, 6 inches of gravel in which the marginal plants can root into. So that's going to tell us how deep down we need to now dig this marginal zone to get it to the right layer. I've also dug the shelf slightly broader than I needed, and now I'm happy with the shape of the pond. I can dig it back slightly to its final size. So we'll crack on. It's just weather would make its mind up. Sun's trying to come out, but it's definitely raining. You all right, Dave?
Good morning.
How you feeling?
Feeling fine, thank you.
2 days on the spade. So we're just sorting out the depth for the shelving and the marginal shelves. I'm just doing a couple of quick references. I've taken again a final reference from what will be maximum water level, which is this stone here. And then from there, I've moved my line 8 inches or thereabouts, and that's going to accommodate a couple of inches of water and then 5 to 6 inches or so of gravel depth. And I'm now just going around with that. There we go. And this is telling me how deep down we need to dig the shelving. Marvellous things, these lasers. To think we used to do this with levels and pegs and strings and things. It's so much easier with this. So we've got a fair amount to dig out. There we go. But we'll work our way all the way around the shelving, dropping all of this down to that depth. And then we can probably make this intermediate section a fraction deeper, and then the deeper end a little bit deeper still. And that'll be the digging done for the pond. We obviously still have to do the bog garden, but that can wait until another day. You tired of digging yet, Dave?
This is all we got, isn't it? So.
Yeah, got to keep going. Apologies, I've not got my microphone rigged up at the minute, so sound quality is a bit naff, but as we're digging, putting up lots and lots and lots and lots of bits of old clay pipe. So far this is just the smoking tube, the bowl being a lot more fragile, but I have got a couple of bits of bowl, although yet to find an intact piece. But nice to know that years ago people were working here, smoking a pipe in this very ground.
There's another bit.
Another bit, add to the pile. The sound of smashing pumpkins accompanying our morning's digging. The Siamese Dream, one of my favourite albums.
Takes all sorts.
Yeah, it's not Dave's cup of tea. Oh. What's in your lunchbox today?
I finished off the rest of the spam, so I got spam on 1.5. Cheese on
Spam?
cheese on the other bit.
You're showing your age there. I don't think I've had spam in years.
Well, it is spam. Cheese spam.
I got tuna rice. Yummy. There we go. We have finished digging the pond. Ooh. And that was quite a big hole. We sort of dug our own graves, haven't we, Dave? So we're now at the position where we can measure up for the pond liner. I'm happy with the proportions of the pond. The depth of the pond, about 3 feet at the deeper section, and this is just a wildlife pond, not a fish or a koi pond, so that's more than enough. Nice depth here so that we can get a couple of nice big water lilies, shallower section here for some intermediate plants, and then obviously all of the shallows around here for the marginals. So to measure up for the pond liner, we're just going to use a flexible tape and just run that down the contours of the excavation, measure in at the longest point and the widest point, and that's going to give us measurements for pond liner and for the pond fleece. So we've got the longest point, looking at it from an aerial view, and now we're going to slacken this off so that we can get the tape to hug all of the contours of the pond. Lots of stones and bricks and things to be quite handy here just to hold the tape in place. Obviously these measurements are quite important. It's worth doing this 2 or 3 times. You know, you've deviated off there, Dave. Move that one. No, not that one. That's perfect. Leave it. Yeah, that one. Lift it up. There you go. Well, we'll have to move it a fraction. We'll come back to you in a minute. So we're allowing about a foot overlap either side. And then of course you always want to err on the side of caution and be generous. So I always like to then move up to the nearest hole number for pond liner. So we're talking about a 10 metre in length, which is going to provide ample overlap and allow for creases and folds. And now we can work out the width. Just make a note of these figures. Easy peasy. So measured up. Order placed for pond liner. We're now just going to be wetting the ground because a lot of this is predominantly clay, and now we've dug it out, it's going to start to dry out. The clay is going to shrink and contract, start to crack, and it's going to cause me problems. So in between now and lining the pond, we'll keep this damp, give the ground a good spray, we'll put in the old fleece, which will also give a good soaking, and then we'll cover it over with some tarps just to get this lot protected, and then we can move on to other areas. Of course, worryingly, I've had to just do a double check to make sure we're not on a hosepipe ban in this area. Thankfully we're not, which would have been a real bloody nuisance if I couldn't use the hose. So off we go. Dave's trying to figure out and work out all the contraptions for the hose. Dave, the other tap to the right. I said boom boom boom, let me hear you say hosepipe ban. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what a male in the prime of his life looks like. Peak performance, alpha male. Working close to home, and summer holidays. I've got 2 of my kids that have wandered over.
That's the main pond.
You've been on the camera before. You both have, actually.
Yeah, I've recorded it before.
Yeah, you have, haven't you? So this is what we've been digging. A lot of digging. There was nothing here before. And then that's the yin, and that's going to be the yang, which will be the bog garden. So all of that has to be dug out as well, so we can put a pond liner in and then fill it back up with soil. Morning, what a beautiful day to be a pond man. And today's task is going to be working on the foundations that are going to provide support for the stone walling around the edges. Now, I would normally be quite happy to put 1 course of edging stone on just a thick, deep layer of muck, and that would act as its own foundation. It's only really there to keep it, holding it together, and an occasional bit of weight from somebody walking on the edging stone. But of course, this is going to be a bog garden, so the ground inherently is going to be very soft and squishy. And so as a result, I need to bolster the foundations. So we're using some of the old slabs that were the edging for the old pond and chopping those up. And I'll put a couple of courses of these running around the outside edge of the pond to provide a bit of a footing for then the course of stonework. And once that's done, we can start thinking about digging out the bog area. And likewise, around this section of the pond, there's a lot of stone from shelf level to visible ground level, and a portion of that is going to be concealed beneath the gravel bed, so it's pointless putting the expensive York stone down here. So again, we'll put a foundation which will be beneath the pond liner, and then the pond liner will come up on top, over the top of the foundation, so that we can start the visible stonework a little bit higher, and that will save on some of the expensive materials, and it will provide a good footing for the walling above as well. Dave's busy beavering away as always.
Good morning.
So the first course of foundation stone has gone in, and I'm now working my way on a slightly smaller brick size piece of slab to just start to build up the level and save on some of the York stone, because as mentioned before, this is all going to be concealed beneath 4 to 6 inches of gravel, so it's pointless putting the more valuable York stone down here where it's not going to be seen. So we'll use up all the slabs that were reclaimed from the original job, and then we can start to build up York stone from about this level once the line has gone up over the top. Quite pleased with that. That's going in nicely. We were expecting a little bit of rain today, so alongside the gazebo I bought a little tarp, and we've made a small shelter so that Dave can huddle underneath and knock up his cement. You right, Dave?
Right, thank you.
But it hasn't rained, but I think he's enjoying himself playing soldiers underneath the tarp there. I wouldn't normally do this, but shouts out to Neil Pandy. It was nice to meet you the other day. There were a few young lads that collared me when I was doing a job. They'd been watching my YouTube channel, and some of them were subscribed. So I said I would make out a little shout out to him. So Neil, thank you very much for watching my videos, and I hope you watch this one. This is actually lovely, perfect weather for working in. A little bit of cloud, not too hot. I don't have to cover myself in sun cream. So the first mix for the main foundation slabs was done using predominantly sharp sand and cement, just to make it a little bit more of a kind of a light concrete mix. And now for the next layer, I'm doing my usual general mix, 4 to 1, 2 sharp, 2 soft to 1 cement. And this has been a great use, using up these old slabs. It means we haven't got to try and get rid of them. And putting some reclaimed free materials back into the job is always a nice bonus. So although it's not imperative that I'm dead level, it will mean that when I'm starting to lay stone further up the courses, it will be easier for me to start. So I am conscious of levels here, and I'm trying to keep it relatively uniform and level. But I can knock them in pretty quick. the delights of Massive Attack, Mezzanine playing behind me. Amazing album from the late 90s. Bought myself a record player recently, and I'm enjoying going through all of my catalogue of favourite music and buying them on vinyl. It's getting a bit costly, but it's good fun. So again, this is all the kind of the unseen work that goes into the foundations of the groundwork of many jobs, not just ponds. And it's really important getting the preparation, getting the groundwork done right in the first place is going to make everything else that much easier and look that much better for the end result. But a lot of expense goes into the underground sections that people wouldn't necessarily be aware of. So all of the foundations in the pond have been completed, and we're just doing the final section of the bog garden. You can see the blue bowser in the background. We're already starting to get a reserve of water in preparation of the pond liner arriving later on this week, and that's going to be an exciting day, seeing some water in here. But just seeing the footings taking shape, it's really starting to define the shape of the bog garden and the pond nicely, coming together. So if you're doing work like this range of kind of smaller half-size tools is fantastic. There's a little digging spade and a small shovel here as well, made by a company called Roughneck. Nice and lightweight tools. Really, really good when you're on your knees or you're just doing small excavation work like this. I've got a habit of naming a lot of my tools, and this one is actually called Dave. I called him Dave because it was doing a lot of digging, which this bloke does. But it does lead for some interesting conversations when Dave's with me and I'm asking him, have you seen Dave? Where's Dave? I'm right here.
Yeah. Both of them.
Yeah. And the cement mixer used to be called Dave as well. But unfortunately, that's gone to the cement mixer heaven now. So that can have a little tamp. We'll get some PVC down in there, and then we'll start to pour another footing and just use the remainder of the slabs to finish up. Well, there's no getting away from it. All of the edging foundation stones are done, and now it's back to the arduous task of digging, which actually I quite enjoy. For the bog garden, so this area here we want to dig down to a depth of about 50 centimetres, so not as deep as the pond, but deep enough to make sure that there's a sufficient depth of soil for, you know, longer rooted plants in the bog garden. Obviously once this is excavated, there's going to be a pond liner put down, and then all of the soil is going to go back in again, so we're actually going to be moving it twice. Dave was quite taken with my European style long sort of spade shovel, so I bought him one for his birthday. It's his 70th next month, so this will be the maiden voyage of his new shovel. Cheers.
Yeah,
Clink clink. Yeah, that ground is not any softer than it was to begin with. Your new one's going to be sharper than mine. What's up, you don't want to get it dirty?
No, just reading what it says on this side.
Instructions for the spade. Now this is a prime example of why it's essential when you're laying ponds and lining that you leave enough overlap all around the pond. As the weight of the water has pulled this liner down, I wasn't generous enough on the overlap on this side. I wanted to try and make sure that as much excess was bog garden side as possible, because I want the excess to go down into the bog garden. So I gambled on a small overlap over here. It wasn't enough. The weight of the water has pulled it in, and when this is completely full, although the pond liner here is still going to be above water level, it's only just, and I'd like to have a little bit more margin for error and have this coming up over on the side. So we're going to pump this out, shift the liner across this way about 6 inches, and then we can fill it up again. And this is the benefit of having a holding tank, so that we can do this. Right, there we go. Second attempt. Turn me on, Dave. Yeah. I'm not sure he'd be able to do that. Nothing. Got to check my boots before I get in the pond now. Bless you. So now we've got a bit of weight of water pulling the liner down. We can see, first of all, there's enough excess either side now, so that's great. But most importantly, you can see where the liner now naturally wants to crease. And it's these areas that I'm going to then start to manipulate to create nice neat folds. When you've got inner curves like this, you can start to create a bit of a gather, pull in some of those folds and loose bits of liner in. And creating that kind of effect, and the weight of the water is going to hold that back and keep it looking neat and tidy. Any creases up here aren't going to be visible at all, because of course that's all going to be underneath stonework and gravel. So I'm really just focusing on the visible bits, which is the base of the pond and the sides here. Now of course it's impossible to have crease free, there's going to be folds in here, but you just want to try and do them neatly. It's handy having a few bricks or stones, something which isn't going to damage the pond liner, that you can then weigh down some of these folds to prevent any of this getting sort of pulled into the pond any further as it fills. Thank you, cameraman. And just like that, we have a pond. Now, there's a lot of wastage on a shape like this smaller area of pond. There's a lot of excess liner, so I'm just going to do a sort of a cursory trim initially to get rid of the bulk of the pond liner down this end, but I'm still going to leave plenty of excess, and then it'll have a final trim at the end. Now the pond has been full for about 5 minutes, and already there's a blooming great dragonfly buzzing around, having a look. Always amazing how quickly nature moves into environments like this. Dave's chilling out eating a sandwich behind the camera. You all right, Dave?
Not bad, thank you.
I think this will be a very convenient moment to end the first video. Thank you for watching part 1, and I'll see you in part 2. I think it's going to be one of those days weather-wise.